It isn't very often that I disagree with the critical drinker, whose channel on YouTube is amazing, by the way. In this particular instance, though, I vehemently disagreed with him. 2019 Florence Pugh, Midsommar. Midsommar is a bizarre film that can be taken a whole different number of ways, and it's one of those then that is it's overly sort of artsy in a way that you either love it or you hate it. You relate it to something or you don't. You either get it or you don't. There's a bunch out there that are like this that I hate, and I've been told it's because I didn't get it, and that might well be. Midsommar really resonated with me. To give a brief sort of synopsis, Danny, played by Florence Pugh, comes from a troubled family, a very depressive sister who ends up very early in the film committing suicide, murder-suicide, using the exhaust from a car to kill herself and their parents, leaving Danny essentially alone in the world. Her boyfriend, who is not very attentive and caring, we find out they've been together for 4 years, has been tossing around the idea of getting rid of her because she has so much baggage, etc. They end up, through a friend from college, from graduate school, traveling to rural Sweden and visiting the bizarre little community / commune, and to witness the weird rituals of midsummer, the way they are practiced by these remote folk. And horrific things ensue. Now, one of the criticisms I've seen commonly online, they say Midsommar is a terribly stupid horror flick. But I didn't think it was a horror flick. And I think it's all about what your expectations are sort of going into it. It has horror elements. It has suspense elements. It has all the sort of bizarre, religious, almost witchcraft, supernatural sort of elements, though we don't see supernatural things like wizards throwing firebolts or anything like that. But their weird religious practices obviously underpin everything that goes on, especially once they get to Sweden. Obviously, what's going on is, at the very surface level, Danny has had this terrible tragedy. She's not getting the sort of support that she needs within her relationship, such as it is. She ends up developing in that community a sense of belonging, redemption, comfort. As Pelle says, the guy from Sweden, do you feel held by your boyfriend Christian? Now, not surprisingly, her boyfriend happens to be named Christian, and I think that's sort of the real underlying metaphor. She's sort of looking for validation or help or ease or comfort, something to fill her from this terrible tragedy. And she is, she's looking for love in all the wrong places, as we would say. And she is surrounded by people from our culture here who are very superficial. They are very focused on their education, their PhDs, criticizing her in her absence for, find a girlfriend that actually likes sex, that doesn't have all this baggage. Like, the real human thing that she's going through is not relatable to these people. And even though they sort of metaphorically give her boyfriend the name Christian, there's none of that there, right? Whether they intend that to be an insult or a rebuke of Christian culture, only they know. But she's not getting a real spiritual life that she needs in the midst of this tragedy. She encounters one in a cult. So there's a ton of things in here that, again, that are metaphorical. My view on it is Midsommar is an example of how people get recruited into cults because of their felt needs being met rather than being given perhaps hard truths, but then pulling them into this world where grotesque and sick things happen. Really, the cult in northern Sweden in the movie is everything in a microcosm that has gone wrong with contemporary culture in the West. It's actually what's happened to irreligious society post-Christianity as people have drifted from religion, They first drifted away into atheism. Now we see society drifting back into religion, but it's weird mythological cults of things like gender identity and witchcraft and fairy worship. And I mean, you name it. Anything concocted by ancient pagans in myth has come back, but there's new manifestations, new folklore, the Slender Man cult online and other things, the cult of the reptilian inner earth people who are real, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. So we see people now being led astray more so than ever by myths and fantasies rather than some rigid comprehension of what they think science is or what is raw material. Now there's all of the cults are sort of growing, multiplying exponentially by day. And the cult in the film Midsommar does all the things that modern people like to do. There's no actual family unit. They use a lot of the lingo of the family, but they're all sort of interbred. They bring in outsiders from time to time. They mention the girl coming of age, Maya, that she now has what translates as a pants license, which means she's free for sex, available for sex. No rules about that are ever spelled out. We see ritual sex done, but we get the idea that people are just kind of doing it, which is very much contemporary culture. As soon as you're considered of age or whatever is accessible to you in your age bracket, people are having sex. People refer to their friends as their family. My real family is this, with the breakdown of the traditional natural family unit. Families, whoever you choose it. Young people often dating in packs and having sex in groups, or at least within the group, is a weird phenomenon that's been going on for a long time now. I heard about 20 years ago almost. Everything like that is done in the cult in Midsommar. It's also very much disguised under virtue. See, all of these horrific things that go on and the perversion of culture today and religious ideas and moral ideas, all of it hides itself as virtue. It's about equality. It's about freedom. It's about affirmation. All the people in the Midsommar cult, they're very clean. By making it Scandinavian, making them very white, obviously the filmmaker, the writer, they're appealing to some of the biases of the culture in which they're going to release it. But everybody's well-dressed. Everybody's very snazzy. They're very folksy. It gives it the feel of something that is traditional and wholesome broadly, but it's not. You hit an age and get your pants license and you can have sex. They're breeding with people outside of wedlock to have them raised by the cult in this general sense, the redefinition of family, of sexual morality, the way they interact with nature, sacrificing the bear, putting someone in it, making someone an animal, representing how they have actually reduced themselves into animalism by the way that they live their lives, and allowing the elders, encouraging the elders, rather, the social pressure to throw yourself off a cliff and do the astupa at the end of your life, to shorten life in this way that they build around it about death with dignity and bringing it to a closure, and it's a joyful thing. And hey, the fact that we don't have to take care of them in a nursing home or find care for them here, and they can pretend that suffering isn't really a thing, that, as we reach this point, well, we'll just dispose of our elderly. We'll cut out the gas chamber. We'll have them throw themselves off a cliff under social pressure, and we'll make it up that it's a beautiful, life-affirming ritual, when really it's a death cult. The thing we don't get in the Midsommar cult is abortion, which, of course, they wouldn't want to tackle that directly as part of the negativity. But being that it's a small, isolated community that needs to reproduce itself and already has this built-in culture of death when you get old, it's sort of superfluous. Clearly, in practical terms alone, they're not looking to abort their future. They're actually trying to import more genetic material to keep this whole bizarre, weird way of life farce going. Even in all of the little details of the cult, the love story about the weird obsessive girl that pees in the drink and cuts off her pubic hair and puts it in the food, and it's a spell that makes a guy love her, that they reenact this as part of their ritual of bringing in outsiders They drug him up, which is a whole other part of this. The free drug culture, it begins immediately with mushrooms. They essentially take everything that's handed to them by these complete strangers in this cult and have this experience leading to fornication, ultimately their deaths. It's really some unfathomable stuff. Also, the tree where the ashes of the ancestors are thrown after they kill themselves, they're cremated, they're thrown into the dead tree. Boy, there's so much there metaphorically. When you look at the life tree, the tree of life in Christianity, in the Bible, the life tree Yggdrasil in Scandinavian culture, but even these Swedes, this cult, it's a dead tree. It's a dead tree. It's got, there's no roots. It's fallen over. It's a dead, hollow, rotting stump. And this is where you throw your ancestors' ashes in there. And of course, the thoughtless American who urinates on it, which really drives home a lot of different things. But the guy that knows nothing of their culture can't really be blamed for not knowing. They didn't tell him. And yet, you know, he's perfectly willing to pee on their tree without finding out anything about it. There's just so much there. So Midsommar really is this cult of things that have gone horribly wrong in an immoral society, disguised as morality, disguised as some virtue, disguised as some sort of faith, which allows these people to live in this sort of outrageous way without any of the moral confines that things like Christian tradition and even traditional, I mean, this is not, the way they're living in this rural village in Sweden in the film is loosely related to some Norse sort of things, but not really. It is a wacky, weird cult that even among pagan cultures, real pagans, ancient pagans, would not have approved of a lot of this conduct. And yet that's what these people are able to live as their lifestyle. And ultimately, because they find it, as it happens with Danny being pulled in, they are adjusted to it. They find their happiness in it, but they find it only in the context of this weird, immoral behavior in which you can chop people up, do the bloody eagle and expose their lungs and other horrific things as part of this human sacrifice ritual. As long as you can keep having sex, keep living the way that you're living, keep doing the things that you're doing without regard to any sort of, the traditional values have all been skewed into the wackiness of the cult. And what I find most fascinating is the way that it unfolds in the movie and we're exposed to it and we see this whole cycle and the bizarre anomaly, like by the end, pretending that by doing this sacrifice, they're purging themselves of their animal base elements, when really all they've done is prove that they worship those elements in themselves. It's really about them. And they're just highlighting that they feel okay doing it now. There's not anything resembling repentance or change of life. So I've watched it actually several times now. I really enjoy Midsommar. It is bizarre. It is weird. Florence Pugh does a great job in it. I don't think I've ever seen anyone that does the facial expressions the way she does. She's capable of an unusual level of scowling that I cannot even replicate. And her mood changes, the way she acts it just on her face when she's not speaking, and the horrifying transition at the end when she goes from the scowl to the smile and the acceptance because she loves them.